Hey everyone, welcome back to another Q&A. We're joined with Murray this morning as we are continuing our walk at the beginning of our journey in Romans. Murray, it's always encouraging to talk about encouragement, and especially when that's framed in the gospel. And before we kind of get into the importance of encouragement, why don't you remind our listeners of the sermon?
Romans 1, 8 through 15, the central question that we asked ourselves is, if Paul is going to a church to preach the gospel to those who already have heard the gospel, apparently their faith was known throughout the world, what's the real impact of that? Why do those who know the gospel need to hear the gospel? We said that there are three reasons. That one, it strengthens faith. Two, that the preaching of the gospel is mutually encouraging, and that's sort of what you were just alluding to there. And then three, it produces spiritual conversion, that it actually transforms people or takes people from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, as God saves people through the preaching of His word.
So how would we frame, right, some of the practical necessities of hearing encouragement, knowing that it strengthens faith and it brings people out of kind of the darkness into the light? What do you see some of the real benefits of gospel biblical encouragement?
I think that biblical encouragement can have an offensive and a defensive element to it, as we were just talking earlier. So the offensive element in that it upholds, supports, I hate to define a word with a word, but encourages, lifts people up, points them towards Jesus, towards truth, towards right living, encourages them to see God at work in the midst of their circumstances, however difficult. But it also has a defensive, a protective element, meaning that it protects. If you're biblically encourage people biblically, we're protecting people against spiritual pride. So we're reminding people whose biblical encouragement could be like, well, that was a great sermon. Well, remember, it's the Lord who does the work, and it's the Holy Spirit that makes it effectual.
Yep.
So that's a form of defensive encouragement.
Yeah, we probably don't consider defensive encouragement necessary because the more pride we gain from, hey, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Like, I've really kind of got my life in order.
Yeah.
Is actually farther you are drifting away from the gospel and the work of Christ.
Yeah, it's good.
And the necessity of it, right? Which would ultimately, I guess, weaken your faith. How would, like, we were talking about children earlier before we started filming. Children might be supported, given hope from their peers, from social media, where they're encouraged in the sense of maybe to do something, right, for the hope of gaining attention or liked. But how can really the gospel help us as parents and kids as well understand that the encouragement of the gospel has to aim in obedience, has to bring you trust in the Lord. And if those elements are missing, it's not really encouragement. So maybe help us really discern between what is encouragement that's pushing us toward the gospel versus encouragement that might just get us more self-appeasing or being liked.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could talk a long time about this. In fact, I think y'all are doing this whole Sunday school series on biblical encouragement. But I think the central theme is one pushes you to think more of you, and the other pushes you to think more of Christ and what God has done on your behalf through Him. How would you answer it?
Yeah, it's kind of like, and you made this point of, hey, don't just tell someone it's going to be okay, right? But in one sense, when we say that, we're saying like, you can do it, you'll be okay, you have the strength. When it's like, well, you don't. God being with you communicates more of an encouragement, like, hey, you are in God's hands and trusting in that plan, not on your own abilities. And I'm encouraged, from the message on Sunday of just the necessity of needing to hear the gospel to protect me from my pride, to protect me from thinking of like, I can be influenced and encouraged in sinful ways
Yeah.
that are cloaked in what seems like encouragement. But if it's not truthful, if it's not aiming me to obedience in the Lord, if it's not putting my hope in God, then we really can define it as biblical encouragement.
Yeah, it's worth a whole lot of discussion. And I actually wanted to say this at the end of the sermon this past week, but I totally forgot. So as you wrap up, I want to say that this upcoming week, as we look at Romans 1:16 and 17, I want people to think about that those two verses were the touchstone moment for the Reformation. And all of the impact of those two verses have across history have just it's been incredible. So look forward to this upcoming week.
Well, there you go, a little teaser for this Sunday. But as always, thank you for listening and your support of Cobble Park. If you ever have a question from a sermon on Sunday or just a topic in general, we would love to discuss it here. Thank you very much.